Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into something pretty huge for, well, a lot of industries, actually. We're talking about the FAA and all this buzz around beyond visual line of sight drone regulations, BVLOS, you know?
Yeah, BVLOS.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming, that's for sure. Anyone who's been, keeping up with the drone world, they've been hearing about BVLOS for years now. But things seem to be they seem to be changing.
Definitely seems like it. I mean, just this month, March 2025, we had Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy visiting that Amazon Prime Air facility out in Seattle. Big news came out of that.
Right, right. The announcement from Duffy about the FAA, they're going to be proposing these new rules to really open up how we use drones. And the big part of that, of course, is BVLOS operations. And he even said, quote, in relatively short order.
In relatively short order, that got everyone's attention.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a pretty big deal when you think about it. Right now, if you want to fly a drone for commercial purposes, you pretty much have to, keep it within your sight the whole time.
Yeah,
That puts a serious limit on, on just about everything you can do with it.
absolutely. I mean, try to picture, I don't know, inspecting a whole bunch of power lines that go on for miles. You'd need someone watching the drone constantly, or you'd have to, have a bunch of people spaced out along the way, each one taking over as the drone gets close. It's like a, nah,
Like a daisy chain of visual observer.
a daisy chain. Exactly. Not very efficient. But with BVLOS, all that changes. Drones could basically fly beyond what the operator can see directly. I mean, that opens up so many possibilities, right?
It's huge. Think
Uh-huh.
about, how much more efficient things could be. And not just that, but what we could actually do with drones. And think about the industries that could benefit. Construction, managing infrastructure, getting things delivered,
Hmm.
even responding to emergencies, all those things you always ask about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the stuff our listeners really care about, real world applications. So that's what we're going to dig into today. Why BVLOS is so important right now, what's held it back for so long, and what it could actually mean for, for all of us, really. So, first things first, why is this BVLOS thing such a big deal? What makes it so different?
Well, the simple answer is that BVLOS is kind of like the missing piece.
Hmm.
It's what could really unlock the whole potential of commercial drones. Think about it. Right now, with these line of sight rules, it's like having a delivery truck that can only go as far as the driver can see. I mean, good for local stuff maybe, but that's about it.
Makes sense. So, give us some real world examples. How could BVLOS change things in specific industries?
All right, let's take construction. Right now, you've got surveyors going out, doing everything by hand, measuring stuff, mapping big areas. It takes forever.
Hmm.
But imagine you've got a drone that can just fly over the whole site, do all that automatically. Or think about bridges, dams, those kinds of structures. A drone could be checking them out remotely all the time, making sure everything's okay, without anyone even having to go near them.
Yeah.
I mean, that saves so much time and money.
Yeah, and probably a lot safer too. So, what about, I don't know, other kinds of infrastructure, not just construction sites?
Think about utilities. Power lines, for example. You have a big storm, you need to check hundreds, maybe thousands of miles of lines for damage. Or what about those big solar farms way out in the middle of nowhere? Someone's got to make sure those are running right and that everything's secure. BVLOS would make all that so much easier, faster, and cheaper. And again, way safer.
Okay, I'm seeing the pattern here, and we can't forget about all the talk about drone deliveries. I mean, everybody wants to know when they can get their packages flown to their doorstep.
Right. And that's exactly where BVLOS is so crucial.
Hmm.
Companies like, Amazon Prime Air, you got Zipline, Wing, they're all working on this stuff. But they can only do so much if their drones can't fly very far without someone watching them. BVLOS is what lets them make longer routes, reach more people, and, make it all actually affordable. Because right now, flying stuff with a drone costs way too much if you can only go short distances.
So you're saying it's not just about like getting a pizza delivered across town, it's about like connecting people in rural areas, getting them medicine or supplies, things they might not be able to get easily otherwise?
Exactly. And then there's emergency response. I mean, imagine this. A drone gets sent out automatically as soon as there's an emergency, like a fire or an accident. It's there before the first responders even arrive, giving them a live view from above. I mean, that could make a huge difference in figuring out what's going on, how to handle things, keeping people safe.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that would be a game changer. So basically, with BLOS, we're talking about doing things way more efficiently, saving a ton of money, and making things safer by, not having to send people into potentially dangerous situations.
Exactly. Now, the thing is, all these benefits, they've been obvious for a while. So why has it taken so long to get these BVLOS rules in place? It's a question worth asking.
Yeah, it does feel like we've been hearing about BVLOS forever. So let's take a look back. How did we get here? What's the story with these regulations?
Well, the FAA, that they've been dealing with this whole drone thing for a while now, trying to figure out how to get them safely into the airspace.
Mhm.
And BVLOS has been a big part of that. Back in 2016, they had this thing called the UAS Integration Roadmap. And they mentioned the need for BVLOS rules. But it was more like, yeah, we know this is important, not really a plan for how to do it.
Okay, so they knew it was coming, but not quite ready to actually make it happen. What came after that?
So a few years later, in 2021, they actually did something pretty big. They put together this BVLOS Advisory Rulemaking Committee. Basically, they got almost 90 people from all parts of the drone industry, companies, experts, everyone, to give their input on how BVLOS could work safely.
90 people. That sounds kind of chaotic. Did they manage to agree on anything?
Surprisingly, yeah. They actually put together this big report in 2022, something like 381 pages. It had about 70 recommendations for the FAA to consider when making these BVLOS rules. It was a pretty big deal, covered all sorts of stuff, safety concerns, the tech they'd need, how operations should work.
Okay, so they'd done their homework, gotten all this expert advice, but we still didn't have any actual rules. What was the next step?
That's when Congress stepped in. In 2024, they passed the FAA Reauthorization Act, and in that, they basically told the FAA, all right, enough talking, you got to move forward with BVLOS. They set a deadline for the FAA to issue a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, the NPRM, by September 2024, and they wanted the final rule by January 2026.
So a real timeline this time. But then, of course, that September 2024 deadline came and went, and no NPRM. Why was that?
Well, the FAA said it was mostly because of, having to coordinate with all these other government agencies. It's not just the FAA involved, right? You've got air traffic control, security folks, all sorts of people who have a say in how things work in the airspace. Getting everyone on the same page, it takes time.
Yeah, sounds complicated. So where are we now? March 2025. What's the latest?
Okay, so as far as we know, the draft of the rule, it went to the White House Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, back in November 2024. That's where they make sure the rules, fit with the president's policies and all that. Usually takes about 90 days. But, like Secretary Duffy said, we haven't actually seen that NPRM yet.
Which brings us back to that announcement from Duffy. I mean, him saying the FAA is going to propose these BVLOS rules, and soon it's a pretty big deal given all the delays. What makes this different, you think?
I think it's that, someone at that level is finally saying, this is important and we got to do this now. Duffy wasn't just saying the FAA was working on it. He was talking about the timeline, about how the U.S. could fall behind other countries like China and the EU if we don't get this right. They're already moving ahead with autonomous drones, deliveries, all that stuff.
So he's basically saying we need to catch up or we're going to miss out.
Exactly. And I think that's what's got people excited. It seems like they're finally realizing that these delays have real consequences. We need to be leaders in this technology, and that means getting these BVLOS rules done.
Okay, so for all of you listening, let's bring this back to you. How could these BVLOS regulations actually affect the things you care about? What are the real-world benefits?
Well, let's go back to those drone as first responder programs. Think about how much more they could do if they didn't have to worry about keeping the drone within sight. They could have drones responding to emergencies automatically, right, sending back live video before anyone even gets there. That could save lives, no question.
Yeah, being able to see what's happening right away, that's huge. And what about construction? We talked about monitoring sites, but what else could BVLOS do for that industry?
Think about all the big infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
Inspecting pipelines that go on for miles or power lines that cross, mountains, forests, all sorts of terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's a nightmare to do those inspections. You need special waivers from the FAA, or you have to do that daisy chain thing with observers.
Yeah, that whole daisy chain thing, it just seems so clunky.
It is. But with BVLOS, you could have one operator monitoring huge stretches of infrastructure from a central location. Way more efficient, you can scale up your operations much easier, and of course it's much safer because you don't have to send people out into potentially dangerous areas.
And then there's the whole drone delivery thing. We all know that's a big one. But it's not just about getting your Amazon order faster, right?
No, not at all. It's about getting essential stuff to people who really need it. Imagine delivering medicine to remote clinics or construction materials to job sites that are hard to reach. BVLOS could make all that possible and affordable. So, for those of you interested in logistics, this could completely change how things get moved around, especially for people who are underserved right now.
So it's not just about convenience, it's about access, efficiency, all sorts of things that affect, well, everyone.
Exactly. Now let's talk about what happens next. Once that NPRM finally comes out, what's the process for actually making these rules official?
Okay, so after the notice of proposed rulemaking gets published, there's this period where anyone can comment on it. That usually lasts a few months, gives everyone a chance to look at the proposed rules, give their feedback to the FAA.
Right. And the FAA is supposed to consider all that feedback before they finalize the rule. And as we said, the goal is to have that final BVLOS rule ready to go by January 2026.
But, there are some people who aren't so sure about that timeline. The FAA hasn't always been the fastest when it comes to making new rules for drones.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, look at remote ID. That took about 4 years from the initial proposal to when it was actually implemented. Part 107 took even longer, closer to 6 years. So while that January 2026 deadline is out there, it's good to be a little cautious. It's a complicated process.
But on the other hand, we do have Duffy making these statements about how important this is, how we need to move quickly. Maybe that will make a difference.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are hoping. It does seem like there's a real sense of urgency now. People are realizing what a big deal BVLOS is and how much could benefit everyone. If they can actually get these rules done quickly, it could be a huge boost for the whole drone industry, create jobs, and really change a lot of industries for the better.
All right, so to sum it all up, after years of waiting and, dealing with all the regulatory stuff, it really seems like things are finally moving forward with BVLOS. And that announcement from Secretary Duffy, it's a big sign that this is a priority. BVLOS could have a massive impact on so many things, from how we respond to emergencies, to how we deliver goods, to, well, just about everything, really.
Absolutely. And it's not just about those specific applications. It's about the whole potential of this technology. It's about thinking creatively. What could we do with drones that we haven't even thought of yet?
Exactly, and that's what we want you to think about.
Yeah.
What could BVLOS mean for your work, for your life? What are the possibilities that open up when drones aren't limited by what the operator can see?
And think bigger, too. What are the things that BVLOS could make possible that we haven't even imagined yet? The potential here is huge. So keep an eye on this because things are about to get really interesting.
All right, everyone, that's our deep dive for today. Until next time.